Okay. About 6 months ago, I got an email from somebody who's probably in this audience. I don't know who it was. But she asked me to please review the Ontario sex ed curriculum and to write something up about it. Well, that type of thing takes a very long time. It takes many hours. I've done it before. I did it for New York City, and I did it for New Zealand and for other places, and it's extremely time-consuming. So I had to just say, I'm sorry, but I can't do it. 3 months later, someone else contacted me. We really need you up here. Please, can you come? I looked at my schedule. It just wasn't doable. About a month ago, I get another email. Dr. Grossman, you must come up here. I started to do some reading to find out what's the story up here. And I learned that the sex ed curriculum was first introduced in 2010. It was canceled after parents protested. There was a promise to rethink and talk with parents, but apparently that was not done in any genuine manner. And now, the curriculum, here it is right here, is back, and it will be in place, I understand, next month. I read about the huge rallies that you had with thousands of people. You have a website, a Facebook site, protesting this curriculum with 14,000 likes on it. You have a petition with 18,000 signatures, and in May you did that school boycott and kept kids home, 20,000 students home in protest. That is amazing. I have been to many, many communities who, like you, are outraged about the sex ed curricula that are being introduced to their schools all over the United States, in the United Kingdom, New Zealand, Australia. I have never seen anything like this. And I'm told that aside from a few journalists who are not mainstream, and one or maybe two members of parliament, your objections are ignored. And the underlying message is that anyone who disagrees with this curriculum must be uneducated or a bigot. Furthermore, the creators of this curriculum, and evidently one of them is in jail for sexual crimes against children, the creators and supporters of this curriculum see themselves as noble and compassionate. They care about your children, and you parents who are fighting this, you're the problem. So I absorbed all of this information for about 24 hours, especially the phenomenal grassroots campaign. And I decided, I'm going to Toronto. You may think that I'm here because the organizers found my work and they were impressed with me. I'm here because I discovered your work and I'm impressed with you. I have reviewed the curriculum for ages 1 through 8, grades 1 through 8. I have not looked at the high school one. If I did, I'm sure I'd have another few hours to talk. The parts about diet, alcohol, smoking, and a lot of other things, it's actually quite good. The priority when they talk about those things is health. For students to stay free of disease and distress. The language is straightforward. There's no nonsense. There's lots of facts, even if those facts are hard to hear. The tone is firm and authoritative. We adults know more than you, and we are warning you about the consequences of unhealthy choices. Don't smoke, don't drink, avoid junky food and sodas, be smart, control your appetite. You can do it. And if you don't, well, there may be a price to pay. Then you move on to the area called human development and sexual health. The approach here is altogether different. The priority is not your child's health. The priority is to mold your child's thinking and attitudes so that they respect and affirm and are comfortable with all sexual choices and lifestyles. This curriculum, like so many produced by the sex ed industry, is based on a specific view of the world. Not the world as it is, mind you, but the world as it should be. The world should be fair. When it comes to sexually transmitted infections, for example, no one group should suffer more than another as a result of their choices. Chlamydia, gonorrhea, and other infections, they should infect people in a random manner, unassociated with behavior. Male and female in this ideal vision of the world should be the same. Mothers and fathers should be the same. It's not fair otherwise. And no one family structure should be better for children either. 2 mothers, 2 fathers, a father and a mother, a donated egg, donated sperm, surrogacy, it shouldn't matter. I call this the Marxist approach to human development. There is a significant flaw with this approach. It's not based in reality. It's a dream. If you look at hard science, biology, physiology, neuroscience, infectious diseases, you find, without any question, that there are very significant differences. Girls and men who have sex with other men have much higher rates of infections. Anal intercourse is much more risky than vaginal intercourse. I'll explain all that in a moment. Children raised without a mother or a father, or who were created with donated eggs or sperm, many of them have emotional issues to deal with. That's reality. Reality is not fair. Reality is not fair. And part of growing up and becoming an adult is realizing that life is not fair. We, as responsible adults, have to deal with real life and teach children biological truths that could save their lives. We can't, for the sake of an idealistic vision of how the world should be in someone's mind, sacrifice the health and, yes, sometimes the lives of young people. And I have to say that that is what's going on in this curriculum. So I'm here to provide you with ammunition in your battle. I can't address all the problems in this curriculum in terms of the sex education, but I'm going to try to address a lot of the major ones. First, I want to tell you just a little bit about me. I'm a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist, and I worked for many, many years, 12 years, on one of the largest campuses in the United States called UCLA. I saw thousands and thousands of students there. Many of them, especially the young women, were suffering due to the sexual choices that they had made. Their suffering was one 100% avoidable. Not only infections, but they had had one or more abortions. They lived in fear of having HIV or cervical cancer. They were confused about their the relationships with their casual hooking up with people. It was affecting their life, their sleeping habits, their studying. Their grades went down, and some of them got depressed and even suicidal. It's very frustrating as a doctor to see young people in the prime of their lives, bright, ambitious, successful young people with their lives in front of them, suffering in ways that could have been avoided. And when I spoke to them and discussed some of the science that I'm about to explain to you, they would say to me, "Why didn't I know that? Why didn't anybody tell me?" I concluded that my profession, the medical profession, is failing young people. I wrote a book called Unprotected. A campus psychiatrist reveals how political correctness in her profession endangers every student. Each chapter in this book describes an actual student or a number of students who came to me for a specific issue and how, due to the politics and the agendas in my profession, their suffering was increased. After that, I wrote another book specifically about sex education, and it's called You're Teaching My Child What? Now let's turn to the curriculum. First, I want to address an issue that I know bothers many of you, and that's age appropriateness. What is age appropriate? How much do we say? When do we say it? How do we say it? There's a story I heard of a little boy who came to his father one day and said, "Dad, where do I come from?" His father took a deep breath and he thought to himself, okay, this is it, the big question, the big conversation. And he sat down with his little son and explained everything from A to Z. Every detail. And at the end, his son had sat quietly listening. He says, "Well, that's where you come from. Do you have any questions?" His son looked up at him and said, "Well, that's funny, because Johnny told me that he came from Montreal." In your curriculum on page 93, it says that kids in grade 1 should be able to identify their body parts, including their genitalia, using correct terminology. We talk about all body parts with respect. Why is it important? The teacher can ask, why is it important to know about your own body and use correct names for the parts of your body? The student can answer, all parts of my body are a part of me, and I need to know how to take care of and talk about my own body. If I'm hurt or need help, and I know the right words, other people will know what I'm talking about. Now, first grade, that's 6 years old. In case you don't have a 6-year-old in your life, here's what they look like. Here's a 6-year-old. Here's a 6-year-old. Another 6-year-old. And finally, a 6-year-old. They're very little. And they're innocent. Their innocence has value. Their innocence is precious. A child's innocence and sensitivity and modesty come naturally and should be protected. My professional opinion is that it's not necessary to teach these terms to a 6-year-old, especially if the parents aren't comfortable with it. I promise you, this little girl's self-esteem is not going to suffer because she can't identify her vulva. Trust me. If the issue here is preventing child abuse, then what you do is you explain to your child that we all have private parts. Those are the parts that are covered by your bathing suit. Very simple, common sense. Anyone who wants to see or touch you there, that's a bad person. You scream, run away, and tell us as soon as you can. But you know, you don't have to take my word for it. Maybe I'm a religious extremist or something. Look at what the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and this is the mainstream organization of child and adolescent psychiatrists in the United States. This is what they say about talking to your kids about sex. Many children have their own words for body parts. It is important to find out words they know and are comfortable with to make talking with them easier. Parents should respond to the needs and curiosity level of their individual child, offering no more or less information than their child is asking for and is able to understand. Now, I don't agree with the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry about a number of things, but this is one instance where they are spot on. Perhaps a copy of this document, which I can provide to you, should be passed along to Kathleen Wynne. What's really going on here with this curriculum is an attempt to desensitize children. The ideology that animates the curriculum confuses sensitivity and modesty with shame and negative self-image, but there's a big, big difference. Now, I want to move on and look at how the curriculum deals with health issues such as smoking and alcohol. Nicotine for grade 4 is very addictive and is absorbed quickly in your body. The craving for nicotine can make a person very uncomfortable, and that can be stressful. Tar is made up of thousands of chemicals that can cause cancer and other illnesses. Smoking, the short-term effects, bad breath, bad clothing and hair odors, possibly problems with family and friends, arguments with parents. Young people who smoke are more likely to be less active, to try other drugs, not do well at school, addiction, yellow teeth, getting out of breath easily, etc., respiratory disease, lung or oral cancer. Alcohol. Again, a long list: higher body temperature, slower reflexes, drowsiness, lowered inhibitions. You can read it, slurred speech, so on and so on and so forth. Now let's look at the guidance for sexual relationships. In grade 6, what should you consider when making any decision regarding a relationship? My comfort level, my personal and family values, my personal limits, and the limits and comfort of others are some of the things I should consider. As if a 6th grader can possibly know that. This is not developmentally appropriate. To determine one's comfort level, your personal and family values, your personal limits and the limits and comfort of others, these are things that adults struggle with. Be clear in your own mind about what you are comfortable with. Being able to talk about this with a partner is an important part of sexual health. Having sex can be an enjoyable experience and can be an important part of a close relationship when you are older. Okay, let's take this apart. Let's start with when you are older. And it uses that phrase everywhere when it talks about sexual relationships. When you are older. So this is for grade 7. When will I be older? I'll be older in 8th grade. I'll be much older in 10th grade. 11th grade, forget it. Can I even wait that long? The message here is that the child will decide when they are ready. Instead of being told, you are not ready, and you won't be ready until you are an adult. As compared to diet and exercise and smoking, where the teacher is an authority and informs the child of what the risks are, and she doesn't downplay it, and she doesn't use kid gloves. She puts it out there in an authoritative way with an expectation, a firm expectation that the student is going to make the right choice. Over here, it's all up to the student to figure out. It's this complex thing that they have to look inside and know themselves and know the other person and so on and so forth. Here's the last one. Grade 8. There are pros and cons. Again, it's complicated. There's pluses and minuses to being in a relationship. There are positive things. There are drawbacks to different levels of intimacy. It's all available to you. You just need to decide. This is a big mistake, and it's inconsistent with the approach that a responsible teacher or medical person or parent should take. I want to read to you what it would sound like if this curriculum used the same approach with sex education as they did with smoking, diet, etc. It would say something like this. It's possible to get an STD from one of the first times you have sex. You could discover warts on your penis or near your vagina. Genital warts are ugly and embarrassing. To get rid of them, you may need to go to a doctor who uses acid to burn them off. Even after treatment, the warts often return for years. It's also possible to get blisters on these areas. Blisters on your private parts hurt a lot. Sometimes the pain is so severe that people have trouble walking, and they can't even go to school or work. It's not an easy thing to explain. The blisters eventually disappear, but they tend to come back, especially when you're under stress. An outbreak can ruin a vacation, a prom, or your wedding. Another thing that could happen, even the first time, and even with a condom, is you or your partner could get pregnant. That's a real life changer, whether you give birth or have an abortion. There are entire books written about women and men who deeply regret ending their pregnancies. Finally, you could get HIV. Sooner or later, HIV becomes AIDS, and AIDS will kill you. That's what it would sound like. Another thing that this curriculum completely ignores is the fact that the brain of a child and an adolescent is immature. I don't know if you have Allstate up here. It's a car insurance company. This is an ad that Allstate ran, and it goes like this. Why do most 16-year-olds, now mind you, this is much older than curriculum 1 through 8, right? Why do most 16-year-olds drive like they're missing a part of their brain? Because they are. Even bright, mature teenagers sometimes do things that are stupid. Don't we all know that? But when that happens, it's not really their fault. It's because their brain hasn't finished developing. The underdeveloped area is called the dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex. It's right here behind the forehead, right there. It plays a critical role in decision-making, problem-solving, and understanding future consequences of today's actions. The problem is, it won't be fully mature until they're in their 20s. Now, this is something that we've known since the early 90s, mid-90s really, for a long time. We've known this about the teen brain. Somehow, this information doesn't get into sex education. And the reason is it doesn't jive with their ideology that people are sexual from cradle to grave, and they should act on their sexual urges at any time. The truth is that you can give a child, an adolescent, as much information, you can give them hours and hours of instruction about sexuality, about consent, about birth control, about how to figure out yourself and who you are and your values and the other person's values. You can talk until you're blue in the face, and they will still go out. And if they put themselves in a tempting situation, many of them will go ahead and act on it and do things they will later regret. Why? Not because they don't have enough information. Their wiring isn't complete. They do things impulsively. They make decisions based on emotion, based on a lower part of their brain, gut reactions, emotions. And then later, when you ask them, what were you thinking when you did that? They say, I guess I wasn't thinking, right? And they're right. They actually weren't thinking. We need to bring this neuroscience, which is what it is, into sex education so that teachers and parents and also teenagers and children understand this, so they know not to even get close to a situation that they will later regret. Why is it that adolescent girls, this is another subject that is completely ignored because it is not politically correct, because it does not jive with the ideology that boys and girls, men and women should all be the same, should get the same sexually transmitted infections and so on. This is ignored, and this is hard science, okay? Girls have an immature cervix. The cervix is the entrance to the uterus. An immature cervix is only covered by one layer of cells. This is what it looks like on an internal exam. The immature cervix is circled in yellow. That area is only covered by one layer of cells, so it's extremely easy for viruses and bacteria to infect that area. As a girl gets older, and when she reaches her early to mid-20s. That area is shrinking year by year. It's almost like there's a target on her cervix for these bacteria and viruses, and that target shrinks, and the area that's only covered by one cell is replaced by an area covered by many cells that's much tougher and more difficult for those bugs to penetrate. So in a way, as a girl gets older, she is growing her own shield, her own tough protection against infection. And there's a diagram there on the right side of what the mature cervix with many layers of cells looks like, and the immature cervix with only one layer of cells. If we are going into the schools, and I'm not even sure we should be doing this because I believe sex education should be at home for those parents that want to do it, but if we are going to be talking about sex in the schools, I'm telling you, girls need to know about this, and they need to be warned. Especially when the curricula is saying to these girls, you know, you need to discuss these things in an open way with who? With your partner? You have a 12, 13, 14-year-old girl, she's deciding, should I become sexually active? Should I really be I'll talk to my boyfriend and he's going to give me good advice. It's absurd. Who would think of that? Oh, here's the cervix again. The mature cervix on the left side, the immature cervix on the right side. Okay. This is why the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, in the United States, that is the authority on all diseases, sexually transmitted diseases pose a severe threat to women's health and fertility. Biological factors place women at greater risk than men. So what I'm saying here is that this is one of the major faults of your curriculum here. This is the reason the immature cervix and girls feeling like, oh, by the way, those infections that I spoke about of the cervix can occur even if a condom is worn. And the ignorance and lack of biologically correct information due to the sex ed industry, has led us in the United States to a situation where another young person between the age of 15 and 24 gets a sexually transmitted infection every 3.5 seconds. That's where we are in the United States of America. You're not actually doing so well over here either. This is chlamydia in Canada, 1995 to 2010, going up. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but you're going to see that they're all going up. Okay, the other thing that I want to point out, very important, if we are going to be, and again, I'm not saying I agree with it, but if the curriculum is introducing to students the idea of various forms of sexual expression, and they are presenting that idea as if all forms are the same risk, we need to do that in an accurate way, because that is simply false. That's a lie. At the very least, anal intercourse in terms of HIV transmission is at least 31 times more dangerous than vaginal intercourse, and this comes from the Department of Health of New York City. The number is probably many times higher than that, but I've used the lowest number because even that is very, very high. The reason for that is anatomy, histology, physiology. The vagina is very different from the rectum. The vagina, the lining, is 20 to 45 cells thick. The elastic tissue of the vagina allows for stretching. It is made for a big baby to get through there, after all. There is natural lubrication. There's a low pH, which inactivates HIV. And the mucus that's naturally found there, it has anti-HIV proteins. As opposed to the rectum, the pH is higher and friendlier to HIV. The lining is only 1 cell thick. It's fragile. It's easily torn. And when there are tears, the virus can easily enter the system. There's no elastic. There's no natural lubrication. Micro tears are common, and there's even a type of cell in the rectum called an M cell. You can read about it in journals of immunology. This doesn't get into sex education. These M cells capture the HIV virus and deliver it into the lymphatic system, which is exactly where you don't want it. And these are abundant in the rectum. So now we have an inkling, one reason why anal intercourse is so much more dangerous, not only for HIV transmission, for transmission of all microorganisms. In my material, in my lectures to kids, I just tell them, it is too dangerous. Don't do it. And I want you to know that when I have in my office a gay man who has sex with other men, and I explain this, invariably he says one thing to me: thank you. Okay, this is a question about condoms. In your curriculum, it says, just like in all the curricula that are pushed by the sex ed industry, that you should always use a condom when you have sex, and condoms will, safe sex, you'll be protected against pregnancy, against infection. Not true. The rates of infection, even with condoms, can be very, very high. With viruses such as herpes and the human papillomavirus, which are the two most common infections, they live on skin that is not covered by a condom. They can be transmitted in that way. And it really makes hardly any difference over time whether a condom is worn or not. Now, the question of condoms being used for anal intercourse, your curriculum fails to explain that there really is no research whatsoever about the effectiveness of condoms in anal intercourse. In Europe, some years ago, in Holland, where gay marriage has been legal for many, many years, and it's a very tolerant culture there, obviously, there was a condom that was specifically developed for men who have sex with men to use. And it was more sturdy and thicker, and it basically failed because people did not use them. But it's an important thing to know, because it acknowledges that when it comes to this particular behavior, you can't depend, you don't depend on that, especially if it's life or death. Now, on the FDA website in America, the Food and Drug Administration, which is the government part of the department in the government that is responsible for medical devices, and a condom is considered a medical device. It used to say, until last year, it used to have this: are condoms strong enough for anal intercourse? Condoms provide some protection, but anal intercourse is simply too dangerous to practice. It said it on this government website, and it explained that they're more likely to break, et cetera, there's more friction, and so on. It was removed. This is no longer on the FDA website. Did biology change? Did physiology change? I don't think so. What changed is the culture. What changed is the pressure on these departments and government organizations to eliminate this sort of warning. And you know what? It harms the very people that they think they're protecting. Who needs to know this more than anything? The boys and men who are interested in having sex with other boys and men. It can save their lives to know this. That's why I call this whole thing such a fiasco. Intentional fiasco. Okay. There's a lot of other things to talk about. I'll just go to this for a minute. Gender stereotypes. Your curriculum is very big on warning students about gender stereotypes. No, no, no. Don't expect boys to like to play soccer and girls like to play with dolls or stand around talking and in the playground, and all those things are stereotypes. There's nothing to them. Wrong. If you go to, you have a medical school here, right? University of Toronto has a medical school, I guess? Yeah. You go to the University of Toronto Medical School, go to the medical library, go into the stacks and look at the current journals: Journal of Endocrinology, Journal of Microbiology, Journal of Neuroscience. There's even a Journal of Gender Medicine, because the differences between male and female are so many, and so many of them are inborn and immutable. Every week you could go, every day you can go online and find another characteristic or feature that is different in men and women, boys and girls. I read such an amazing thing, and that is that every organ in the body is actually male or female. Even the heart, the liver, because every cell is, except red blood cells, but every cell in the body is imprinted with male or female because of the chromosomes, right? You have either two X or an X and a Y chromosome. That makes a big difference. And, so every organ is different. And it turns out that if someone needs a kidney or a liver transplant, they'll do better if they get that organ from the same sex donor. Because if a woman gets a liver from a male, and that liver has all those Y chromosomes in all the cells, her body is more likely to recognize it as foreign and to mount an immune reaction and reject it. So why am I going into this? Because to say that, to tell kids that there's nothing to the idea of gender stereotypes, that it's all due to our culture and society, that boys and girls, men and women behave differently, go into different professions, take care of the kids, one goes home, all that stuff, it's falsehood. It's been proven false. It's a throwback to the 60s, to the 50s and 60s and 70s, when we didn't know what we know now about genetics and about the human genome and about all these things, we used to think that the Y chromosome was a genetic wasteland. That's what it was called. Like there was nothing on it. They used to think the only thing on the Y chromosome is just a little bit of information about, you get like a lower voice and you have like hair on your chest or, your all that's only those things. That's it. But now we've had a biotechnological revolution, right? We have mapped out the entire genome, including the Y chromosome, and we know that the Y chromosome is filled with information. And the Y chromosome begins to have an impact on a person, on a boy, when he is 8 weeks after conception. An 8-week-old embryo, the brain of an 8-week-old embryo, a male, begins at that time to be different than a female. All the way back then, 8 weeks after conception. So I have a whole talk on this, but I have this research here on monkeys. They took juvenile monkeys, male and female, and gave them a choice of toys. Either a truck on wheels. It's not a truck, it's a police car, sorry. A police car or a doll. And they let the male and female monkeys pick what they wanted to play with. Lo and behold, the boy monkeys preferred the police car. The girl monkeys liked playing with the doll. I guess we have gender stereotypes. There's the 8-week-old embryo. This is when the brain begins to differentiate between male and female. Now this, in my opinion, is the most radical and disturbing sentence in the entire curriculum. Stereotypes are usually formed when we do not have enough information. Not everyone has a mother or father. Someone might have 2 mothers or 2 fathers. Now, it's true that not everyone lives with both their mother and father. It's true that not everyone knows their mother and father. Not everyone has a mother and father. Did I need to come all the way from New York to tell you that? Of course, everyone has a mother and father, and the ideal situation is for a child to be raised by that mother and father. The vision that's behind this sentence is that biological bonds are irrelevant, that a child only needs loving adults, and that genetic relationships don't matter. I'm not disputing, please don't misunderstand, I'm not disputing that there are many instances of loving, wonderful parents who adopt or use assisted reproductive technology to build their families. But to deny the significance of a biological tie is preposterous. For example, look at the most obvious example is look at all the effort and expense put out by couples who want their own biological child. Instead of adopting, which may be much easier and quicker and less expensive, They yearn for their biological child, for their flesh and blood, for their family history, to look in that child's eyes and to possibly see themselves, their parents or grandparents. It's a natural thing. Well, you know what? A child has the same yearning to look in his parents' eyes and see where they came from. In fact, there's an International Declaration of Child's Rights that explicitly states that a child has the right to be connected to his history, where he came from, his culture, his genealogy. If you look at the children who were created using donated sperm, anonymous donated sperm, they are speaking up all over the world. And what they're saying, many of them, is not at all pretty. They're angry because of the legislation in the countries where they were conceived. They have no possibility of locating their biological father. They are angry. They are outraged. In fact, many of them believe that third-party reproduction and donation of sperm and eggs should either be much more tightly regulated or banned altogether. When making policy decisions about these type of things, we have to listen to the children, to the consequences of these things, not to, I know that the parents are in pain, and I know that the parents are yearning, but the children come first. Now, those kids, the ones who were created using anonymous sperm donors, do you know that many of them walk around when they're on a bus or on the subway or walking down the street? They see someone, an older man that looks like them, and they wonder, is that my father maybe? They might see someone their age or younger. Could that be my sister, my half-sister, my half-brother? How many siblings do I have? You know, in the United States, I don't know about here, but there is no regulation as to how many offspring can be created from one man's sperm donations. There are men that have hundreds and hundreds of children out there. They are also speaking up, some of them, and they're not happy at all. Now, I have many questions for Kathleen Wynne, but one of them is this. How is it that you acknowledge the pain and the tears of certain groups, but not others? You acknowledge the struggle of students who are gay or lesbian or who have gender issues. You've tuned into that and you'll do whatever it takes to support them. But you ignore the plight of many, many other children, the children that I just described. This curriculum, whoops. This curriculum, you see how it says in big letters here, health. It's supposed to be a health curriculum. This curriculum, when it comes to sexual curriculum, is entrenched in ideology. Instead of having as its goal the protection of students' health and well-being, it's centered on indoctrinating the child with a set of beliefs. Those set of beliefs may or may not be consistent with their parents' values. And it most certainly is not based on current knowledge about child and adolescent development, sexually transmitted diseases, neuropsychology, and many other areas. It cannot be based on current science because current science undermines the worldview. And when the truths of science run contrary to the ideology, they're ignored. They simply don't exist. What they do, and this is what happens in every instance, they attack the messenger, like one of the speakers said before, that he was called an idiot. And I'm called all kinds of names. Some of them I won't repeat here. I'm called names. Do they attack me based on the science? No. No. They attack me, they call me names, and dismiss me and ignore me. Some of the biology that you just learned can make the difference between life and death. And yes, I know a woman who got HIV from one encounter. She had anal intercourse one time, and now she has AIDS. It can happen. So this is an urgent issue. The sex ed portion is deeply flawed. For adolescents, the sexual urge is natural and healthy. Of course it is. But it should not be acted upon. The curriculum fails also in its own mission to respect the diversity of cultures in the schools. I cannot imagine how a child coming from a traditional Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, etc., I hope I'm not leaving out lots of people, I cannot imagine how those kids feel. And you know what? They have, it's just the most amazing thing. They actually have 2 pages in this curriculum called Equity and Inclusive Education in Health and Physical Education, and it's all about respecting diversity, all students, parents, all members, regardless of ancestry, they're welcome and included and respected and blah, blah, blah. Students should see themselves reflected in the curriculum. The curriculum affirms the worth of all students. Teachers enable students from a wide range of backgrounds to see themselves reflected in the curriculum. Do your kids see yourselves in this curriculum? So to conclude, this is all about a crusade to change society, to desensitize children, to indoctrinate them with falsehoods. Instead of fighting deadly viruses and bacteria, this curriculum is fighting homophobia. I encourage you to stand firm. Your voices matter. Science is in your corner. Parents know what's best for their children, not educator activists. So I'm going to finish with a story. When my son was about 7 or 8 years old, he came home from school and he announced, "I know how babies are made. Danny told me." So I said to him, "Why don't you tell me what Danny explained, and I'll tell you if it's correct." He looked up at me in astonishment, and he said, "What? You know?" Thank you very, very much.